In the heart of Manhattan, where the pulse of America's media beats loudest, the Fox News studio stood like a modern coliseum, its glass walls gleaming under the weight of a nation's gaze. On this crisp April evening in 2025, the air inside crackled with anticipation, a storm brewing under the glare of blinding stage lights. The Hannity set, a battleground of ideas, was primed for a clash that would echo far beyond its polished floors. A showdown not just of words, but of generations, loyalties, and truths. At its center stood Caroline Levitt, a 27-year-old White House press secretary, her deep blue suit a defiant banner against the chaos she was about to face. Her heart thundered, not with fear, but with the fire of conviction. Her Catholic faith a quiet anchor in the storm. She was no stranger to scrutiny, having weathered the signal leak scandal and the relentless churn of Washington's rumor mill. Yet tonight was different. Tonight, she faced a titan, Robert De Niro, Hollywood's lion, whose venomous words still lingered in the air. Moments earlier, De Niro had strode onto the stage, his black suit sharp as a blade, his eyes carrying the cold menace of Vito Corleone. With a single sentence, "Trump is a disaster, and Levitt is his puppet." He'd lit a fuse. The crowd erupted, a cacophony of cheers and jeers splitting the room between MAGA red and liberal blue. Whistles pierced the din, a primal call to battle, as De Niro's accusation hung like smoke. A young woman, barely seasoned, dared to speak for a president he despised. To him, Levitt was a pawn, a Gen Z mouthpiece, reading scripts for a man he'd branded a gangster. But Caroline Levitt saw something else in the spotlight's glare. Not a trap, but a crucible. This was her moment to shatter the puppet label, to prove that youth and faith could stand tall against Hollywood's gilded scorn. The studio buzzed with raw energy, its bright lights casting long shadows across the audience. Working-class patriots in trucker hats, urban skeptics with smartphones raised, all hungry for the next blow. Sean Hannity, the ringmaster, leaned back in his chair, his grin betraying the thrill of orchestrating this spectacle. For Levitt, the stakes were personal. She wasn't just defending Trump. She was defending her right to be heard, her New Hampshire roots, her sleepless nights crafting words that carried a nation's hopes. De Niro's attack wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to erase her, to reduce her to a caricature in a culture war that thrived on silencing the bold. But Caroline Levitt didn't bend. Her fingers tightened around the microphone, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo, her eyes blazing with a resolve that said she'd come to fight. This wasn't politics as usual. This was a reckoning, a chance to flip the script on a legend who thought his Oscars made him untouchable. In that moment, the studio wasn't just a stage. It was America itself, a fractured land where power was wielded not just in boardrooms or ballots, but in the raw, unfiltered arena of public judgment. Levitt stood at its edge, a young woman against a giant, her faith and loyalty her only armor. De Niro, waiting in the wings, believed he'd already won, his words a guillotine poised to fall. But he didn't know Caroline Levitt. He didn't know the fire in her veins, the prayers she whispered in the dark, or the country rallying behind her. As the crowd's roar swelled, one truth burned clear. This wasn't just a debate. It was a battle for the soul of a nation, and Caroline Levitt was ready to claim her ground. The Fox News studio pulsed with the raw energy of a nation divided. The Hannity stage, a crucible where words were weapons, and the crowd, a jury. Caroline Levitt stood backstage, her silhouette barely visible against the curtain. But out here, Robert De Niro owned the spotlight. At 81, he moved with the swagger of a man who'd built an empire, not just of films, but of defiance. His black suit hugged his frame like armor, his silver hair catching the stage lights as he gripped the microphone. A seasoned warrior, ready to draw blood. The audience hushed as Sean Hannity introduced him. Hollywood legend, never afraid to speak his mind. And with a nod, De Niro unleashed a torrent that would sear itself into America's memory. "I'm here to say one thing," he began, his voice a gravelly blade, thick with the Little Italy accent that had made him a legend. "Donald Trump is the biggest disaster America has ever seen, and Caroline Levitt, the Gen Z kid, is his newest puppet, a mouthpiece who knows nothing beyond reading the scripts Trump shoves in her hands." The words landed like a grenade, splintering the crowd. Liberals leapt to their feet, clapping wildly, their phones flashing to capture the moment. MAGA supporters hissed, whistles of defiance cutting through the applause, their faces flushed with loyalty to the woman De Niro dared to dismiss. The studio air thickened, a furnace of rage and anticipation, as De Niro leaned forward, his left hand raised like a conductor commanding a symphony of chaos. "You think I'm kidding?" He smirked, his eyes sweeping the room, daring anyone to challenge him. "I've seen guys like Trump, con men, all flash and no substance. I've played gangsters in movies, but Trump's the real gangster, and Levit's his childish lackey. She's 27, hasn't lived enough to know what's going on, and she dares stand before the nation as a spokesperson for a clown." Laughter roared from the liberal corner, a few shouting, "Right on, Bobby." As De Niro paced, his presence magnetic, his words a calculated assault. He pointed at the camera, as if Levitt were already in his crosshairs backstage. "She's the youngest press secretary in history, right? Sounds nice. But what's she done besides cover for Trump? Look at the signal leak. She let the world see Trump's plans by adding a reporter to the chat by mistake. I don't know if she's incompetent or intentional, but if that's how she represents the American people, we're in big trouble." The crowd howled, a mix of glee and outrage, phones raised high to immortalize the moment. De Niro shrugged, a smirk curling his lips, as if he'd already knocked Levitt out without breaking a sweat. Hannity tried to steer the chaos. "Bob, she's coming out to face you right now. What do you think?" But De Niro cut him off, his voice sharper than a switchblade. "Face me? I'd love that. I want to see her explain how she justifies being Trump's puppet, a guy I've called a danger for years. I stood outside his courthouse, told the crowd to their faces he's unfit to lead, and now he's back with a Gen Z kid as his megaphone. It's shameful." The audience split again, half cheering, half booing, the noise a living thing, pulsing through the studio's veins. De Niro wasn't done. He paced like Travis Bickle stalking the streets, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "I've seen America through decades. I grew up on real streets, not fake mansions like Trump. I make movies. I built Nobu. I live real. Trump? He just destroys. And Levitt? She's the young face he uses to fool people. Like, look, I'm modern. But she's not fooling me. She's got Catholic faith, prays every day, fine. But if she's praying to cover for Trump, even God can't save her." Laughter erupted, louder now, a few liberals standing to clap, their eyes gleaming with vindication. He paused, turning toward the wings where Levitt waited, his tone a gauntlet thrown down. "Caroline, I know you hear me. You tweet you're not afraid of anyone, that you'll defend Trump at all costs. So come out here. I want to hear you. No edits, no scripts, just the truth. But I'll warn you, I don't go easy. I've fought bigger than you my whole life, from film sets to politics, and I've never lost." The crowd roared, a tidal wave of applause and jeers, the tension taut as a bowstring. De Niro sat, tapping the table lightly, his grin smug, certain he'd already won. Hannity laughed, leaning forward. "Caroline, you hear that? He's ready." Phones lit up the room, capturing the challenge, the air electric with the promise of a fight. Somewhere backstage, Levitt stood poised, De Niro's words, puppet, clueless kid, echoing like a call to war. This wasn't just a stage anymore. It was a battlefield, and De Niro had drawn first blood. But America, watching through screens and streams, sensed something he didn't. A young woman, underestimated, was about to step into the light, and the nation would never be the same. Behind the heavy velvet curtain, where the Fox News studios roar, dulled to a muffled pulse, Caroline Levitt stood alone in the shadows, a solitary figure against the chaos unfolding beyond. The air back here was cooler, tinged with the faint metallic tang of stage equipment, but it did nothing to soothe the fire in her chest. De Niro's words, Gen Z puppet, clueless kid, slashed through her mind like a whip, each syllable a calculated jab, meant to unravel her before she even stepped into the light. Yet Levitt didn't flinch. Her deep blue suit, crisp and unyielding, clung to her petite frame like a second skin, a silent vow that she would not be broken. Her blonde hair, pulled back tightly, gleamed faintly under the backstage glow, and her fists clenched at her sides, not in fear, but in defiance. She was 27, the youngest White House press secretary in history, and tonight, she'd make that title mean something more than a footnote in De Niro's narrative. The distant roar of the crowd seeped through the curtain, a reminder of the arena waiting to judge her. De Niro's voice, still echoing in her ears, carried the weight of a man who'd spent decades shaping America's imagination. Vito Corleone, Travis Bickle, a Nobu empire built on charisma and grit. He thought he could bury her with a smirk, reduce her faith and loyalty to punchlines for a liberal mob. But Caroline Levitt was no stranger to being underestimated. She'd grown up in New Hampshire, in a middle-class home where hard work and prayer weren't just values, they were survival. She'd clawed her way through Trump's campaign, faced the signal leaks fallout, and stood before reporters who'd tried to tear her apart. De Niro's stage was just another proving ground, and she'd be damned if she let him write her story. She turned sharply, her high heels clicking against the floor, and locked eyes with her assistant, a wiry young man clutching an iPad like a lifeline. "Where's that old De Niro clip?" she asked, her voice low but razor-edged, betraying none of the storm within. The assistant's fingers flew across the screen, pulling up a grainy 2016 CNN interview. "Here," he said, tilting the iPad toward her. There was De Niro, younger but unmistakable, his gray suit sharp, his grin warm as he praised Obama. Smart, visionary. Levitt's lips curled into a faint smirk, a spark of strategy igniting in her blue eyes. "Good," she said, her tone clipped. "Send it to production. I want it ready when I go out." The assistant nodded, already tapping out commands, but Levitt's gaze drifted back to the curtain, where the stage lights bled through like a beacon. That clip was her ammunition, a shard of De Niro's past she'd wield to expose his contradictions. He'd mocked her youth, her faith, her loyalty to Trump, but she'd show America he was no saint, just a man whose words shifted with the wind. She thought of her parents back home, watching on a worn couch, praying for their daughter to stand tall. She thought of the MAGA supporters in the crowd, their trucker hats and raised fists, counting on her to fight for them. And she thought of Trump, the man who'd trusted her, a college kid turned warrior, to carry his voice. De Niro wanted unscripted truth. She'd give him truth, sharp, unrelenting, and forged in the heart of a country he'd forgotten. Her fingers brushed the cross necklace beneath her collar, a quiet ritual that steadied her pulse. This wasn't just about her. It was about every young American told they were too green to matter, every believer mocked for their faith, every patriot dismissed as a pawn. De Niro's Hollywood swagger couldn't drown out the heartbeat of a nation that still believed in grit over glory. She straightened, her shoulders squared, her eyes blazing with a fire that could outshine the studio's lights. The assistant glanced up, sensing the shift. "You ready?" he asked. Levitt didn't answer, just nodded once, her jaw set, and took a step toward the curtain. Beyond it, the crowd's chants swelled, a tidal wave of expectation. De Niro sat out there, smug in his victory lap, certain he'd already crushed her. Hannity's voice boomed, teasing her entrance, and the stage awaited, a battlefield where legends fell and new voices rose. Caroline Levitt wasn't just walking out to debate. She was marching to reclaim her name, to turn De Niro's daggers into dust. America was watching, and she'd make damn sure they remembered her stand. The curtain parted, and Caroline Levitt stepped into the blaze of the Fox News stage, her high heels striking the floor like a war drum. The studio lights hit her full force, bathing her deep blue suit in a glow that seemed to dare the world to look away. The crowd's roar surged, a chaotic symphony of mega cheers and liberal jeers, as Sean Hannity rose, his voice cutting through the din. And here's Caroline Levitt, White House press secretary, ready to face Robert De Niro. Across the stage, De Niro sat, arms crossed, his smirk a fortress of Hollywood arrogance, expecting this 27-year-old to crumble under the weight of his earlier assault. But Levitt's eyes locked onto his, unflinching, a storm of resolve brewing behind her steady gaze. She wasn't here to lose. She was here to rewrite the rules of the fight. Gripping the microphone, her voice rang out, clear and unyielding, slicing through the studio's fevered air. Mr. De Niro, I heard everything you just said. Gen Z puppet, clueless kid. You think you can stand there with your 2 Oscars and Goodfellas voice and humiliate me and President Trump in front of the nation? You're wrong. The room froze for a heartbeat, stunned by the steel in her tone. De Niro's eyebrow twitched, his smirk faltering, but Levitt gave him no room to breathe. She stepped forward, her petite frame radiating a defiance that filled the stage. You call Trump a gangster, me a childish lackey, but have you looked at yourself? A Hollywood legend, living in luxury off Nobu hospitality, starring in flops like Alto Nights, and you dare talk about failure. You've made millions playing tough guys, but in real life, you're just an out-of-touch relic who doesn't get the American people. The MAGA crowd exploded, leaping to their feet, their applause a thunderclap that shook the studio walls. A few stood, fists raised, chanting her name, Caroline, Caroline, as if she'd just landed the first blow in a prize fight. Levitt's eyes never left De Niro, who shifted in his seat, his hands tightening on the chair's arms. She pressed on, her voice a blade honed by years of fighting for her place. You mock me over the signal leak? Fine, I didn't run that chat. But what do you know about accountability, Mr. De Niro? You stood outside Trump's courthouse, called him a malignant narcissist, but ever looked in the mirror? She signaled production, and the big screen flared to life, casting a harsh glow across the stage. There was De Niro 2016 grinning on CNN. I like how Obama handles things. He's smart. He's got vision. The clip froze, and Levitt turned, her voice cutting deeper. That's you praising Obama, the guy Trump beat to bring the change millions of Americans wanted. So who's the hypocrite here? I may be young, but at least I'm not pretending like you. The crowd erupted again, whistles and cheers blending into a wall of sound, the studio vibrating with their fervor. De Niro's face flushed, his smug grin gone, replaced by a flicker of unease, a legend caught off guard by a woman he'd dismissed as a kid. He opened his mouth, but Levitt cut him off, her voice rising like a tide. I'm not done, Mr. De Niro. You say I'm Trump's puppet? I'm here because I believe in what we're doing, making America strong again, from the economy to the border. And you? Who do you represent besides Hollywood elites? You live in mansions, open Nobu restaurants, while I grew up in New Hampshire, in a middle-class family, knowing what Americans need. Who's really out of touch? The mega supporters surged, their shouts drowning out the liberal corner's murmurs, a chant of Caroline echoing like a battle cry. Hannity laughed, his hand raised as if to temper the chaos, but Levitt wasn't slowing down. She stepped closer, pointing straight at De Niro, her voice dropping to a searing whisper that carried through the mic. You mock my faith. Say I pray to cover for Trump. I pray for strength. Strength you don't understand because you only play tough on screen. I don't need Oscars to prove myself. I've got the American people behind me. Applause spilled across the room, even some neutrals nodding, swept into her orbit. De Niro leaned back, hands trembling, his earlier bravado unraveling like a frayed script. Then came the final blow. Levit leaned forward, her eyes locked on his, her voice low but lethal. You want unedited truth? Here's the truth. Trump won because the people chose him, not you. I'm 27, but I've worked for him since college, from the White House to the campaign. I'm not a puppet, I'm a voice for millions. And you? You're done, Mr. De Niro. Alto Knights lost $40 million. What standing do you have to talk about success or failure? The crowd detonated, a victory symphony of claps and whistles, as De Niro shot up, pointing at her, his voice cracking. You think you're clever? I've fought bigger than you my whole life. But his words faltered, drowned by mocking whistles, and Levit's faint smile held steady, a gladiator claiming the arena. Hannity jumped up, clapping, his laughter booming. Caroline, you just made this stage yours. Levit sat, legs crossed, her gaze unflinching as De Niro stared back, his face red, hands gripping the chair like a lifeline. The studio pulsed with her triumph, phones flashing to capture the moment. A young woman, armed with faith and fire, had turned a legend's attack into her coronation. America watched, breathless, as the stage became hers, and the nation braced for what came next. The Fox News studio vibrated with the aftershock of Caroline Levit's onslaught, the air thick with the scent of victory and the sting of defeat. The stage, still bathed in a harsh glow, seemed to tilt under Robert De Niro's feet as he sat. His face flushed a deep crimson, hands clamped to the arms of his chair, like a man clinging to a sinking ship. Across from him, Levit sat poised, legs crossed, her faint smile a quiet challenge that pierced deeper than any shout. The crowd's energy hadn't dimmed. MAGA supporters roared, their chants of Caroline a relentless tide, while liberal pockets hissed, their loyalty to De Niro fraying under the weight of her precision. Sean Hannity, ever the showman, leaned back, his grin wide, savoring the chaos as the nation watched a Hollywood titan falter. De Niro's eyes darkened, his earlier swagger replaced by a raw, unsteady anger. He rose, pointing a trembling finger at Levit, his voice straining to reclaim the stage. You think you're so smart, kid? He growled, his Goodfellas cadence cracking under pressure. You dare stand here, using old clips to lecture me? Who do you think you are to say I'm done? The words hung heavy, meant to wound, but they lacked the venom of his opening salvo. The crowd hushed for a moment, waiting for the knockout punch that never came. Instead, Levit sat unmoved, her gaze steady, a silent rebuke that spoke louder than his bluster. The MAGA side erupted in whistles, a few shouting, "Sit down, Bob," as laughter rippled through the studio, sharp and unforgiving. Hannity raised a hand, his voice cutting through the noise. Bob, cool it. She brought receipts. How do you answer that clip? De Niro spun toward the now dark screen, where the ghost of his 2016 Obama praise lingered like a betrayal. So what? He snapped, his hand slashing the air. I can change my mind. I'm not a puppet like her, reading Trump's script word for word. But the retort fell flat, drowned by a fresh wave of laughter, someone in the back yelling, "Really done now, Bobby." De Niro's face tightened, his jaw working as if chewing on his own pride. He'd walked onto this stage a legend, untouchable. But Levit's jabs, "You're done. Alto Knights lost 40 million, had stripped him bare, exposing a man out of step with the arena. He thought he ruled. He tried again, leaning forward, his voice rising to a shout. Don't get cocky with me. I built my career from nothing in Little Italy, not thanks to Trump or Fox News. I've got Nobu, I've got films. What do you have besides a mouth reading his orders? But the mega crowd's applause surged, swallowing his words, and another voice rang out. Alto Knights lost 40 million, Bob. The laughter swelled, a cruel chorus that echoed Levit's earlier strike. De Niro's hands shook, his knuckles white around the microphone, and for the first time, the man who'd played gangsters and rebels looked small. Not a titan, but a relic raging against a tide he couldn't stop. Levit leaned forward, her smile sharpening. You want to talk about scripts? I don't need anyone to write my words. But what about you, Mr. De Niro? You've lived off scripts your whole life, from The Godfather to The Irishman. I'm here because I believe in what I say. The crowd clapped, louder now, their cheers a living pulse that seemed to lift her higher. De Niro's eyes flared, and he shot back. She's not firing me up. She's just an arrogant kid. I've been fighting Trump since she was in diapers. But his voice wavered, and Levit struck again, her tone calm but lethal. I pray for strength, Mr. De Niro. What do you pray for when Alto Knights flopped so hard? The studio detonated with laughter, a sound so fierce it seemed to shake the walls, and De Niro stepped back, his face blank, the microphone slipping from his hand to thump onto the table. The commercial break hit like a mercy bell, but the drama didn't pause. As the stage lights dimmed, De Niro sat, his chest heaving, trying to gather the pieces of his shattered narrative. Levit remained still, her eyes locked on him, a quiet promise that she wasn't finished. Hannity's voice broke the tension, teasing, Bob, she scored points. What have you got to turn this around? De Niro muttered, I don't need to turn it around. I'm Robert De Niro, and she's nothing. But the words sounded hollow, a desperate grab for a crown that no longer fit. The crowd's cheers belonged to Levit now, their phones capturing every flinch, every falter, ready to flood the digital world with proof of her triumph. Outside the studio, America leaned closer to their screens, sensing a shift, not just in this fight, but in the soul of a nation where giants could fall, and a young woman's voice could rise to meet them. As the Fox News studio lights flickered into a commercial fade, the clash between Caroline Levitt and Robert De Niro didn't dim. It ignited, spilling from the stage into the boundless arena of America's digital heartbeat. The crowd's final cheers still echoed in the air, a raw pulse of triumph and division. But beyond the glass walls, a new battleground erupted. Phones, already raised high during Levit's searing "You're done" line, now hummed with purpose, fingers flying across screens to launch the night's drama into the stratosphere. Within moments, the nation wasn't just watching, it was choosing sides, amplifying a showdown that had become more than a debate. It was a mirror held up to a fractured country, reflecting its rage, its pride, and its hunger for heroes. Fox News' production team, ever swift, struck first, uploading a highlight reel to X before the studio seats had even cooled. The clip was surgical, Levit's piercing delivery of the 2016 Obama clip, De Niro's face crumpling, and her lethal closer. You're done, Mr. De Niro. Alto Knights lost $40 million. Within 30 seconds, #Levit vs De Niro rocketed to X's top trend, a digital wildfire spreading faster than a prairie blaze. Tens of thousands of posts flooded the platform, each one a spark in a growing inferno. Mega warriors, emboldened by Levit's stand, dove in like soldiers storming a beach. A prominent account, boasting 500,000 followers, fired off a salvo. Caroline Levitt just knocked out De Niro. Gen Z 1, Hollywood 0. Paired with a still of Levitt at the mic, her eyes ablaze, it racked up thousands of likes in minutes, a battle cry for a movement that saw her as their new champion. Memes cascaded like a tidal wave, each one sharper than the last. The fastest spreading showed De Niro, red-faced and trembling, captioned, "When you think you're a Goodfellas gangster but get schooled by Gen Z." Another, a fan-edited video, synced Levit's "You're Done" with a silent De Niro from The Irishman, hitting over 200,000 views in an hour. A mega account crowed, "Caroline just showed De Niro Fox News isn't Hollywood's playground. Retire, Bob," with a photo of Levit raising her hand to the crowd, pulling retweets by the thousands. The moniker Killer Caroline was born, a badge of honor for a 27-year-old who'd turned a legend's attack into her coronation. One user summed it up: "Trump didn't pick her for show. She's a real fighter." The words spread like gospel, uniting a base that saw Levit as proof their fight wasn't fading. It was evolving. But De Niro's faithful didn't surrender quietly. On X, his fans rallied, desperate to salvage their icon. "De Niro's a legend. This kid just used cheap tricks," one wrote, clinging to his legacy. Others, though, couldn't deny the sting. A loyalist admitted, "I love Bob, but he got smoked. Levit was too sharp, he couldn't keep up." A taxi driver meme twisted the knife, De Niro's Bickle snarling, "You talking to me?" with the reply, "Yeah, and you lost." Some hit harder, accusing him of crossing a line by mocking Levit's faith. "He looked like a bully, and she made him pay," one tweeted. The words shared thousands of times alongside clips of the crowd laughing at Alto Knight's flop. The divide wasn't just personal, it was America itself, split between those who revered Hollywood's old guard and those who cheered a new voice unafraid to topple it. The media pounced, fanning the flames. Fox News led the charge, their headline blazing: "Caroline Levit teaches Robert De Niro a lesson in truth." A Fox and Friends commentator tweeted, "She made De Niro an example. Don't mess with Trump's Gen Z." Liberal outlets pushed back, grudgingly impressed but defiant. CNN's take was sharp. "Levit scored, but she's still Trump's mouthpiece. Don't be fooled." Variety stirred the pot with De Niro's rare defeat. He underestimated his young opponent, conceding, "She's smarter than we thought." That old clip was a perfect hit. Across the country, voices joined the fray. A middle-aged man in a MAGA hat grinned at his buddy in a Cleveland diner. "She made me proud." Took down De Niro, right on Fox's turf. In a Brooklyn cafe, a woman leaning liberal shook her head over her latte. "I like Bob, but she was too sharp. He didn't stand a chance." Screens lit up from coast to coast. Levit's "You're Done" line racing across Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, a cultural lightning bolt. One user dubbed it the drama of the year. Caroline 1, De Niro 0, sparking #De Niro meltdown to rival #Levit vs De Niro. The clash wasn't confined to the studio anymore. It was a national reckoning, a snapshot of a nation where truth was a prize fought over in hashtags and retweets. Levit had wielded her youth like a blade, cutting through De Niro's armor to expose a disconnect that resonated far beyond politics. She hadn't just won a debate. She'd claimed a generation's voice, proving that power wasn't owned by elites, but earned by those bold enough to fight for it. And as the digital storm raged, America leaned in, hungry to see where this new warrior would strike next. The digital storm that erupted after Caroline Levit's triumph over Robert De Niro didn't fade with the night. It deepened, carving new paths through America's fractured landscape. As the hashtags #Levit vs De Niro and #De Niro meltdown burned through X, the Fox News studio's echoes reached the corridors of power and the heart of public imagination. In Washington, the White House buzzed with a quiet pride, its marble halls whispering of a victory that felt like more than a debate win. It was a torch passed to a new generation. Caroline Levit, still clad in her deep blue suit, walked through those halls with a steadier stride, her faint smile now a badge of resilience. At 27, she'd done what few dared, faced a Hollywood legend, and left him reeling, reshaping not just her own story, but the contours of a nation's political soul. In the West Wing, the mood was electric. Hours after the Hannity showdown, Donald Trump's phone lit up X with a tweet that thundered across the platform. Caroline Levitt was fantastic. She just showed De Niro and the fake Hollywood crowd the truth. Very proud. The words weren't mere praise. They were a coronation, a signal that Levitt had cemented her place in Trump's inner circle. Advisors like Stephen Miller and Kayleigh McEnany, who'd once questioned whether the young press secretary could handle a heavyweight like De Niro, now nodded in grudging respect. An insider, speaking to Fox News, put it bluntly, Trump loved that performance. She didn't just survive, she crushed him on home turf. Levitt's next briefing drew a packed press room, reporters probing about Signal or Trump with renewed intensity. But she met them with a confidence forged in fire. "I faced De Niro," she said, her smile silencing skeptics. "These questions don't faze me." The room fell quiet, awed by a woman who'd turned a stage into her dominion. Across the conservative heartland, Levitt's name became a rallying cry. Charlie Kirk, the firebrand host, tweeted to his millions, "Caroline Levitt is the future. Youth, faith, and fearless. She just taught Hollywood a lesson." Breitbart's headline roared. At 27, she did what veteran politicians wouldn't dare, took down De Niro before millions. Small X polls popped up, showing MAGA supporters clamoring for more. Some even typed, "She crushed De Niro, put her in the Senate." Ibo. Aye. The killer Caroline persona took root, transforming her from a press secretary into an icon of a new conservative wave, one not just loyal to Trump, but armed with the savvy to dominate the media battlefield. Her Catholic faith, once mocked by De Niro, now connected her to millions who saw her as their voice, a warrior who prayed for strength and fought for their America. The Signal leak, once a blemish, vanished in the shadow of her victory, replaced by an image of a fearless gladiator who'd slain a giant. But not everyone cheered. In liberal enclaves, De Niro's loyalists licked their wounds, calling the clash a staged stunt to prop up Trump's machine. The Daily Beast sneered, "Levitt's just a talking puppet. Using an old clip doesn't make her good, just well-trained." MSNBC's pundits doubled down. "She's sharp, but don't forget she speaks for Trump, who De Niro rightly calls a danger." Yet even detractors couldn't deny her skill. A CNN journalist admitted De Niro underestimated her, and now she's got a spotlight conservatives will milk dry. The narrative shifted. Levitt wasn't just a mouthpiece. She was a force, a young woman who'd turned a Hollywood Titan's attack into her launchpad. Her briefings became must-watch events, each answer a reminder that she'd faced worse than their questions, and walked away taller. For De Niro, the fallout was a bitter pill. The next day, he sat in a CNN studio, his face drawn, trying to claw back his narrative. "She's arrogant, but Trump's still the big issue," he said, his voice lacking its usual fire. "I didn't lose. I'm just speaking truth." But the cameras caught the strain in his eyes, the slump in his shoulders, a legend dented by a fight he hadn't seen coming. His fans on X rallied, insisting, "De Niro's a legend. One loss doesn't change that." But others were merciless. "He just got humiliated by Levitt. He's done," one wrote. The words shared thousands of times. Variety's analysis stung. De Niro's rare flop. He didn't expect Gen Z to hit back so hard. Critics pounced on his misstep of mocking Levitt's faith, one tweeting, "He looked like a bully, and she made him pay." The Atlantic weighed in. De Niro excels against dodgers, but facing a Levitt who fights back threw him off. At 81, his anti-Trump crusade, once a clarion call, now faced whispers. Was he still the voice to lead it? De Niro's legacy, 2 Oscars, Nobu, a resume from Goodfellas to The Irishman, held firm. But this clash left a visible scar. Some fans urged him to stick to films like the upcoming Zero Day, arguing he was out of his depth sparring with youngsters like Levit. For her, the victory was a revelation. At 27, she'd turned De Niro's Gen Z puppet jab into leverage, using his own words to flip the script. From aiding Kayleigh McEnany to running for Congress, she'd honed an edge that shone brightest on Fox News' turf. Her faith, shared openly on CBN, wasn't just personal. It was a bridge to millions who saw themselves in her fight. Trump's "very proud" tweet marked her as the vanguard of a new MAGA generation, one that didn't just follow, but led with ferocity. As Levit walked away from the briefing room, her heels clicking with purpose, the nation watched a star rise, one who'd proven youth wasn't a flaw, but a weapon sharp enough to reshape America's story. The White House briefing room, with its rows of expectant reporters, faded into the background as Caroline Levitt's shadow stretched far beyond Washington's marble corridors. Her clash with Robert De Niro, now etched into America's collective memory, wasn't just a moment. It was a fault line, splitting the nation open to reveal its raw, beating heart. From the Fox News stage to the endless scroll of X, Levit's victory had become a saga, a story of youth challenging power, of faith defying scorn, of a country wrestling with who gets to define its truth. As the dust settled, the air crackled with a new reality. A 27-year-old press secretary had not only bested a Hollywood legend, but had redrawn the battle lines of a polarized America, where every tweet, every meme, every raised voice carried the weight of a nation's soul. Levit moved through her days with a quiet fire, her deep blue suit swapped for others, but the resolve in her eyes unchanged. She'd walked off the Hannity stage a warrior, her "you're done" line still ricocheting across screens from Ohio diners to California coffee shops. The country hadn't just watched her. They'd felt her, a young woman who'd refused to be silenced by a man whose Oscars once seemed to grant him immunity. Her stand was more than personal. It was a beacon for every American who'd ever been dismissed, underestimated, or mocked for their beliefs. In church pews and living rooms, conservatives whispered her name with pride. Killer Caroline, the Gen Z star who'd taken down De Niro and reminded them their fight was far from over. Her faith, once a target, now shone as a rallying cry, proof that strength wasn't just in words but in the convictions that fueled them. Across town, De Niro retreated to the quieter corners of his world, his Nobu empire humming, his film sets waiting. But the sting of that night lingered, a bruise on a legacy that had weathered decades. At 81, he'd roared outside Trump's courthouse, a titan against a system he despised. Yet on Fox News' turf, he'd faltered, undone by a woman he'd called a puppet. His CNN appearance, meant to reclaim his voice, only deepened the wound. His eyes betrayed a man grappling with a shift he hadn't foreseen. America still revered him, his Godfather lines quoted in bars, his Irishman scenes dissected online. But the clash exposed a truth. The old guard's sway was waning, challenged by a generation that didn't bow to fame. De Niro's fight wasn't over, but it was different now, shadowed by questions of whether his fire could still burn in a world moving faster than he could run. The nation, split as ever, found its mirror in their duel. Expulsed with hashtags, #Levit vs De Niro, #De Niro meltdown, each a vote in a referendum on power, age, and truth. Memes of Levit's blazing eyes clashed with clips of De Niro's trembling hands, a digital war where narrative was king. Trump's tweet, "very proud," wasn't just praise. It was a gauntlet, declaring Levit the face of a MAGA reborn, young and unafraid. Liberal voices pushed back, insisting De Niro's loss didn't erase Trump's sins, but even they marveled at Levit's precision, her old Obama clip, a masterstroke that turned a titan's words against him. From coast to coast, Americans argued over beers and keyboards, some seeing Levit as a patriot, others a pawn, while De Niro was both legend and cautionary tale, a man whose overconfidence had cost him a round in a fight he'd thought he owned. This wasn't just drama. It was America in 2025, a land where influence wasn't won in boardrooms alone, but in the raw, unfiltered arena of public will. Levit's triumph showed that power belonged to those who seized it, who wielded facts like weapons, and refused to let others write their story. She'd studied Dairo, used his 2016 praise to flip his puppet jab, and stood firm when he mocked her faith, proving that preparation and heart could topple even the mightiest. Dairo's mistake was hubris, thinking his Goodfellas grit would outshine a woman half his age, a lesson for anyone who underestimates the new blood rising in workplaces, debates, or streets. In a country where a single tweet could shift the tide, Levit's stand was a blueprint. Know your foe, hold your ground, and never let them define you. As the saga spread, from TikTok reels to cable news loops, it carried a deeper truth. America's future wasn't owned by the past, but by those bold enough to claim it. Levit, with her New Hampshire roots and sleepless nights, embodied a generation ready to lead, not follow. Dairo, with his Oscars and defiance, reminded the nation that legends endure, but only if they adapt. The clash was a snapshot of a nation at war with itself, where youth and experience, faith and fame, fought for the microphone. And as Levit's star rose, the question hung in the air: who would dare challenge her next? The country leaned in, hungry for the answer, knowing that in this arena, the next fight was never far away.